Hello everyone, my name is Michael Tarallo. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Qlik, as well as a Community Administrator and Advocate for the Clixsense community forums. I'd like to welcome all of you to this webinar and thank you for spending this time with me to learn more about our new hosted platform, the Qlik Sense Cloud. Now, you might have heard us state in our presentations and materials that Clixsense helps unleash your intuition. What do we mean by that exactly? Let's first define intuition. Intuition is simply the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning or deep thinking. When you combine that knowledge with Clixsense, you have self-service data visualization that is truly made to be fast and easy. Easy to understand, easy to use, and easy to visualize while helping you see the whole story in your data. Clixsense allows you to use your intuition using a redefined approach to self-service data visualization, which helps you find that unexpected. As you will soon see, anyone can do this, reducing dependency on IT by empowering users of all types with the ability to discover, create, and share meaningful analysis using our smart capabilities. Those capabilities include global smart search, smart data loading, smart visualizations, color intelligence, and data storytelling. These capabilities truly enable faster time to insight to anyone, anytime, anywhere, and on any device. Now, I've been in the BI industry for over 17 years. I've seen and used a variety of products out there. Some claim to be self-service, but really ask yourself this question. Is self-service truly self-service if you still need to depend on others to get the data you need, or if the tool requires significant help or preparation in order to get started? No, it's not. So keep that in mind as you watch what I do today. Today, I will introduce you to the Qlik Sense Cloud, a freely available cloud-based data visualization and analysis platform powered by Clixsense. With Qlik Sense Cloud, you can create, analyze, and share your findings with others using any device, whether it's a computer, tablet, or smartphone. You build apps by simply uploading file-based data, which allows you to begin creating sheets, visualizations, and data stories. Note there are plans to add more data sources and features as we improve the product following our continuous release cycle. You get 250 megabytes of free storage, which includes data uploaded and the apps created. Apps do have a 25 megabyte limit. You can also upload and freely share apps you have created with Clixsense Desktop with up to 5 users. So to start, I will create a simple app that will not only help me analyze data, but will also allow me to communicate my findings with others. Also note, we have a free, fully featured Clixsense Desktop product that provides the same analysis and creation capabilities as Clixsense Cloud, but with access to more data sources and local storage of your apps. To learn more about Clixsense Desktop, you can join me on my live weekly webinar every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, or watch the recording in the Qlik community. Finally, I'd like to make mention that there is also a licensed version of the Clixsense Enterprise Server, which takes your cloud-based Clixsense experience to the next level by providing the same online creation and analysis capabilities, along with collaboration, security, management, and governance, all within your own managed on-premise or hosted environments. Okay, so let's get started exploring the Qlik Sense Cloud. So to get started, I open up a web browser and go to qlikcloud.com, and then I click on Register. Now I've already registered. What you can do is fill out the form, you'll receive an email notification, and just click on the link for verification, and then you'll be brought back to the login screen. Now in this case, I'm already registered, so I'm going to log in, and then I'll be brought to what's called the Clixsense Cloud Hub. And the hub is your main area for navigation and organization of your analysis. In this case, you could create your own personal analysis. You can share utilizing the Share Cloud stream. You have a location where all charts that you publicly make available as individual objects are stored. You also have a location for your personal data files that you upload. So to get started quickly, we're going to go into My Personal Cloud, and we're going to create a new app. And here's where you could actually upload an app that you've created, let's say with Clixsense Desktop, or possibly with Clixsense Enterprise, and then exported as what's known as a QVF file, and you could upload that and make it available for usage or sharing within the cloud. In this case, we're going to create a brand new app. So we're going to call this Sales Webinar Analysis. Click Create App. Now that the app is created, the next thing you need to do is add data into the app. There are a few ways you can add data into the app. One of those ways would require you to actually upload data utilizing the personal data files area that I showed you earlier. Another way would be to utilize existing data connections that have been set up already within the app, or perhaps attaching your data files to the app. Let me give you an example. Here I'm going to go into the Data Manager, and the Data Manager allows me to select existing connections to files that I've already uploaded. When you upload your own personal data files, you'll have a location with your user ID, as you see here. I could also get data from Qlik Data Market, which I'll show you a little bit later, and then attach files. And what attach files does, it actually attaches the data to the app. So when you export this from Qlik Sense Cloud, you can then import it into Qlik Sense Enterprise, and the data will come along with it. That way, any augmentation or reloads won't fail because the source files are already included with the particular app. So here I can drag and drop files or select from the Explorer interface. In this case, I have some file data in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. And what I'm going to do is just drag it and drop it. And it uploads it. And now it'll interpret it. So the Excel spreadsheet has a number of tabs in it. Each tab is represented as a table. I have my actual column names that I could rename or deselect or select, as well as choose the additional tabs. In this case, they become tables. Now you'll notice that we have different types of files that could be uploaded. You can upload fixed record, Excel spreadsheets, HTML, XML, KML, delimited file, as well as our own indexed in-memory representation of the data on disk, which is known as a QVD or QVX file. So at this point, what I'm going to do is choose Profile. So let's say I don't understand how this data relates. You remember I chose 3 tables. There might be an association or a relationship between these, and let's say I'm not familiar with the column names in all these tables. This particular profile feature will allow you to see how the data relates. In this example, you can see we have products and categories, and you can see that category ID and category number have a 100% match when it comes to the sampling of the data values. By default, we relate data on its column names. In this case, these column names don't match, but the tool is saying, well, category ID and category number do match, so it's recommended that these particular columns have something in common, which in this case they do. So what I'll do is select that association and make it a common name, such as category ID. And then we can step to the next one. Now in this case, there isn't any relationship. Product ID and customer number have a high percentage of value match, but that's just because the values are simple values like numerics, but it's safe to assume based off of the column name that there isn't any relationship between products and customers. So at this point, we can click Load and Finish, and we can go directly into editing the sheet. Now you have an interface where you can now grab your chart objects and begin designing your visualizations. You have a list of all your fields, as well as a master items list that allow you to create reusable expressions, dimensions, and measures, as well as defined visualizations. And all of these are available for reuse. So let's grab a bar chart. Let's define this bar chart very simply. Let's grab category name, and I want to grab sales. Sales does not exist in my data model yet, so we need to add that. Well, no worries. I can go directly to the data manager. In this case, I'll open it up in a new tab. And the data manager allows me to basically make changes to the data that's been loaded into the app. I could delete, I could edit, I could add new data. So let's go back to adding some more data, go back to attach files, and let me grab my orders data that has my sales information within it. It uploads the data, attaches it to the app, and now shows me all of the relative columns. In this case, there's my sales information. So let's do profile again. And this will now show me the relationship between the data that's already loaded in the app, as well as the new data that we have available. So categories and orders, there isn't any relationship in this particular one, so we can skip it and go to the next one. Now this is interesting. Customer number and customer ID are showing as a match. You'll notice that customer ID exists in both tables, but they have a 0% match in data values. That is a great way of providing an example of where you have column names that might be the same but show different data, and you don't want to automatically associate them. In this case, it's making a recommendation that customer number and customer ID are the appropriate match. So in this case, we'll select that and call it customer ID. And we'll step through the next one. And here we can see that product ID and product number is the recommended match. In this case, it's safe to assume that this is the association we want. So we'll click product ID, load and finish. Okay, now we have the new data loaded to our app. And now I can begin looking for sales. And there's my sales metric. Now notice that when I added this data to this app, I didn't have to concern myself with which was a primary table, which was a secondary table, without any fear of loss of data. I also didn't have to have any complex data modeling skills. I didn't need to understand which was an inner join or an outer join or how to define those. It just works. You add the data, it associates on the common column name, and you're ready to go. Okay, so that's our first bar chart. Very simple. So let's make some changes to this chart. Let's add a title called Sales by Category, and then make some changes within the interface. So you have your Properties panel. Here's where I can change the label. Instead of calling it category name, let's just call it category. We have the ability to issue dimension limits, such as top or bottom. In this case, maybe I want to look at the top 5 values, or maybe the bottom 5 values. In this case, we'll put no limitation on it. Sum of sales, we'll call that sales. Number formatting, make it money. I can change the sort order. I can even add a reference line. So in this case, let's add a reference line. We'll call it target. Make it green. And we'll give it a value of 4 million. And there's my reference line. Now, a nice little feature I'd like to show you is we've also added variables. Basically a way of defining a particular value that can be changed by simply updating the variable. In this case here, we go to the variables interface. I'm going to create a new variable, and I like to always start it out with a lowercase v, and we'll call it vTarget. So that's going to be the name of my variable, vTarget. And the expression I'm going to put is 4 million. And click close. Now if I go back to the reference line expression, I can go into the expression editor, delete my constant value, and I'm going to type in $v, and you're going to see our autocompletion shows me the variable that we just created, vTarget. And I'll close it with the parentheses here. And what that'll do is that will now take the place of my constant variable. So if I have multiple targets that are defined in multiple chart objects, in this case I'll just create 2 here, and then I go into my variables interface. Let's just change my variable now to 3 million. You'll notice that the target value now changes accordingly in all of the chart objects that have that defined variable. So a nice way to define more sophisticated types of analysis, as well as keeping all of your objects updated and only having to make a change in one place. Okay, so let's delete that. Let's go back to our chart object. Let's make some appearance properties. Here we can add subtitles, footnotes. Maybe we'll use some color intelligence and we'll make a color scheme or gradient for the particular bar colors. So in this case, the larger bar is indicating the higher number of sales. Well, when I put on some color intelligence, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the darker color indicate a higher number of products sold. So maybe I'll put in a title here that says darker color shows higher number of products sold. Okay, when we get to our color intelligence section, I'll show you how that comes into play. But that will put a subtitle right up here. Presentation, make it horizontal, put the data values on the labels, colors and legend. Here's our single color, color by dimension, or color by measure. So earlier when I was talking about the darker bar of the color, it's kind of redundant. The actual larger size of the bar indicates the higher number of sales in this case. Well, so does the darker color. So let's turn this on by changing how we color these bars. So instead of coloring by measure, let's color by expression. Now, color by expression is neat because you can use conditional logic to define a color scheme that you choose, or you could actually choose to use an aggregate. So in this case, the expression is a color code. We'll uncheck that. And what we'll do is we'll go into our expression editor, and let's choose count, and let's choose product ID. And now we're going to look at the count of product IDs. Now the darker color bar is indicating number of products sold. So we can say products sold in the label. Okay, and just to prove that to you, if I've changed it to measure, you can see the bar indication change for women's wear. Okay, so that's some of the color intelligence capability. Let me just choose this divergent gradient. I like that color better. And we can turn a legend on. And then we have some y-axis and x-axis properties. Okay, so that's all of the properties that are configurable within a particular chart. Now, most chart objects follow this paradigm. So I'm not going to go through all of that for each chart that we do define today, but you get the picture that that's how you can make adjustments to your charts. Now, after making all of those adjustments, I'd like to save this chart for later use. So I just grab it, drop it over into my master items, click add, and now I have a predefined chart that I could reuse. Please keep in mind, this makes a little bit more sense when you have an enterprise environment with multiple people where you want to give them a basis to start creating visualizations, and this could be their base example that they can then build from. Okay. So let's go into another example. Now we're going to perform some selections. So in order to do that, I'd like to add another visualization. So let's add our KPI object. And a KPI object is great for tracking performance of your particular metrics. So again, to keep it simple, I'm just going to use the sales measure. And now we have sum of sales. Okay. Now let me go into an analysis mode. Okay. Now we don't clutter our dashboards with checkboxes and radio buttons and list boxes because a lot of our selection capability is actually built into the chart objects themselves. So here I'm actually scanning the different values of our categories. I could choose individual items. And if it was like a scatter plot or a map, for example, I could even lasso. Okay, so keep that in mind that a lot of the selection capability is built into the visualization itself, as well as maintained through the selection bar. Now here's another thing I wanted you to notice. As I'm making these selections, you notice that the KPI object is updating. I didn't have to manually wire anything together. There isn't any manual linking or wiring of visualizations. I didn't have to define parameters for each of the visualizations and include them and link them together. The other thing you'll notice is I didn't have to create a separate sheet for each object that I created. I didn't create a bar chart. I didn't create a KPI and then create a dashboard and then include my bar chart and my KPI. Everything is designed into one interface, reducing the amount of development time you need. Okay, so let's clear this up and let me demonstrate another differentiator. And I'm going to just put some simple list boxes down. We're going to take our, let's see, countries, and we'll take our customers. Okay, let me just adjust these accordingly, a little bit more field of view. And I'm going to go back into analysis mode. Okay, so let's say I wanted to filter in on Germany. So I click on Germany, and what do you see? Clixsense gives us some visual feedback in the form of green, white, and shades of gray. And that is an indication of the associative engine and the associative model showing you the relationships automatically within that particular selection. Green is showing me what's selected. White is showing me what's related to the selection. Light gray is showing me what is also possible. And dark gray is showing me what's not related. So by one simple click, I could actually get more information. And this is the particular feature that kind of helps you see the unexpected and allows you to see the whole story in the data. I'll give you a more meaningful example in a minute when I go through the usage part, but keep this in mind that this comes in handy when you set out to answer one question and it helps prompt you to ask additional questions that you might not have thought to ask originally. Okay, so this is one example of creating something very quickly with Clixsense, but where Clixsense really shines is in a server-side online environment. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch over to a web browser on my machine, and I'm going to access a environment that I have set up for this demonstration. It allows me to access Clixsense in a server environment. This is Enterprise, Clixsense Enterprise Server. And you can see we have a similar interface. Now, Clixsense Enterprise Server could be installed on-premise. It could be installed on a hosted environment like an Amazon or a Rackspace, for example. And all you need is a web browser, an HTML5 compliant web browser to access the particular interface. And the same creation capabilities are available as well, including the management, administration, and governance capabilities. So You see within this view here, we have what's called the Clixsense Hub, and the hub has streams, and what streams are is just a way of organizing and securing content for individual users. So based off of the user ID that I'm logged in with, I have access to a particular stream. So streams help organize and secure analysis. So here I'm interested in the consumer goods sales app, and I click on that app, and it brings me into an overview of the app that shows me all of the sheets that have my visualizations, as well as bookmarks, which are predefined selection states, and data stories, which are narratives or my findings that I've collected through my analysis, and then I want to present to my management team later on. So let's say I just want to look at sales rep performance. So I'm going to choose the sales rep performance app, get a little bit of information about it, and then open that app up. And here we see our gorgeous visualizations laid out in the form of a tree map, a scatter plot, a data table, and a bar chart. So let's say I might have some knowledge of the dimensional model, for example, the dimensions and values, but if you're not sure, what is one of the things that people do when they don't know how to find something? They search. So with our global smart search capability, we can search all of the data that's been loaded into the app, and the smart capability, the searching, will provide a index list of relevant values that you can choose from based off of what you typed in. For example, I'm interested in looking for low performers. So as I start typing, you can see it's giving me a recommendation of values, such as, are you looking for a low performer, low fat, lower, and you can see all of the instances of these values inside these dimensions or fields that provide values that have the value or text value of low in it. In this case, I want low performer, so by selecting low performer, that actually initiates a selection for the sales rep performance field. And you can see this is also an example of a governed data value that I've selected. So I only have an option to choose low performer, or in this case, high performer. Okay, so we're going to focus on the low performers. So that's another way of initiating a selection within the interface and helping those along with their analysis. Now let's focus on the bottom 3 reps here of those low performers. And you can see as I interact with the data table, all I do is simply select those particular values, and we can confirm those selections. Okay. Now we have a scatter plot here, and this scatter plot basically is showing me sales versus margin, and they're also colored by the number of lost customers. So with these high margin, low selling products in this particular area, we're losing the most customers for these particular reps. So this is uncovering a particular opportunity or discovery. Now this might be too small for my viewing, so I can make it larger. And when I make it big, we also allow the number of labels to be hidden or to display. We also provide an indication or heads-up display, if you will, of the various dots or points or data elements that are in my view. Okay, this is part of our responsive design that allows you to see as much information as possible within your viewing area, so it gives you the most optimal viewing experience. Okay, so if I wanted to perform a selection here, I can select these high margin products, and I can confirm my selection. Now at the same time, I might be interested in capturing this data for a presentation that I might use later. So I can turn on snapshot mode and take a snapshot of my particular analysis that I'm going to use later and lay that out within my data story. And we'll touch on that in a little bit. Okay, so that's an example of interacting with the data. It gives you an example of smart charting and the color intelligence. Now let's say I want to navigate to the next page, and I want to look at this information geographically. You'll see that my selections are maintained within the sheet. I'm still looking at those 3 selected low-performing sales reps. And what we've done is we've uncovered another opportunity here by looking at the sales within the Northeast. And we can see that there aren't any in the Northeast. So therefore, another opportunity. But at the same time, this gives me an opportunity to learn something a little bit more about my data. And you'll notice that in my selection bar across the top, Sense is giving me another piece of information through the power of green, white, and shades of gray. Now let me use my browser here. I'm just going to zoom in using the Control+ key on the keyboard, and you can see that these bars that are available here give me an indication of the number of values that are available within the sales rep category, and it's also showing me the shades of gray, including the green. The green is the current set of sales reps that we're looking at. The light gray are showing me the other low performers that are out there, and then the dark gray is showing me the reps that are not low performers. Okay, so let me just reset my zoom here. Okay, and based off of this indication here, I can learn a little bit more about the other low performers. And I can do that by selecting the interface and then choosing Select Alternative. And what that will do is show me the other low performing sales reps, that the alternative selection. And you can see what we have here is that those particular low performers were not having any problems selling products within the Northeast. So uncovering another opportunity there. Okay. If I wanted to take this information and export it out to, let's say, a graphic like a PNG or a JPEG file, I very simply can just right-click and select Export as Image, or I could also choose to export it to a PDF. If I wanted the entire sheet to be exported to a PDF, I can select Export Sheet to PDF from the menu item above. So just keep that in mind as well. So printing and export capability are available through the use of right-click in the menu options. Okay, so we're going to switch gears now. So what I'm doing here by presenting this to you live could be perceived quite odd if I was in a, let's say, management meeting to present my findings. So what I would normally do is probably present a narrative or story based off of my findings. And if you remember, I can take a snapshot during my analysis of any of the particular chart objects that we discover and store them inside the snapshot repository. But let's go to our data storytelling mode. And let's look at the data story that's been prepared for the sales rep performance. And what you can see here is that now we have the story prepared that I can play. Again, can be displayed on a tablet or on a smartphone, or as you see here on a browser. And then this is basically the collection of the snapshots of the point-in-time analysis combined with additional context and text and graphics. So here's our bottom performing sales reps. Here's the Scatterplot showing the impact on margin, and that it's the high margin products that our worst performing sales reps are losing the most customers. And then here is the indication showing you that there was no sales within the Northeast. Here's a couple of others that I didn't go through today for the demonstration, but give you an indication of how they can be assembled. And then one of the things I'd like to focus on here is that, so we're saying during our presentation, even low performing reps are selling fresh vegetables. And you can see that fresh vegetables is the top performing product group in the central region versus all regions. But what happens during these presentations? Sometimes you're challenged and additional questions are asked, and you might want to answer them immediately, but what you'll have to do? In a traditional sense, you might have to go back, rerun your analysis, and then come back and present the findings again. But at any time, you can jump out of your data storytelling and go directly to the source of when you captured that snapshot and then start performing additional analysis. So somebody says, well, I see central region is selling fresh vegetables, but what about the other regions? Well, let's check it out. If I choose Northeast, fresh vegetables. If I choose Southern, fresh vegetables. And if I choose Western, we see wine and cheese, and then fresh vegetables comes into the top three. Okay, so that allows you to answer those additional questions during the presentation, and then we can seamlessly jump back right into the data story and continue our presentation. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a nice indication of how you can analyze data, perform selections, capture your findings, and then present those findings within data storytelling. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. I'm back in the design interface in Qlik Sense Cloud, and I'm just going to right-click on these list boxes and delete them. And let's start creating a couple more visualizations, and I'm also going to show you how we can derive new fields and add more data to this app. So deriving fields basically means we're going to create new fields from existing fields or existing data that we've already loaded. So for example, let's say I want to create time series analysis and I need some date dimensions like year and month, and all I have is order date. Well, I can create new fields utilizing functions such as year and month and extract those components from the order date. And we can do that very easily by utilizing master items and then starting to create these new fields within the appropriate area, such as dimensions. And I'm going to select Create New. And right in this field location is where we can begin entering in our expression. So I'm going to click the function editor, and then I'm going to start typing. So as I start typing, you can see the auto completion and IntelliSense prompts me to select the appropriate function, in this case year. Now do note we do have complete function list within our help documentation. And then I'm going to start typing in the field, in this case order date, and you can see it also helps me to select the appropriate field, and they're also color coded. That's all I need to do. Year order date will extract the year component from the full date. I click apply, and we name this function year. Add that dimension. Next, I'm going to do the same thing for month. And here we're going to do month order date. And we'll call that one month. Add that dimension. Also note, if you want to build up a data dictionary to be used by others, where, for example, this makes a little bit more sense of building up this library, as I stated before, when you publish this app to Clixsense Enterprise, that way people can have a list of reusable expressions and dimensions and measures that have been created. You can create also simple ones, such as category name is in the field list, but I want it to say category. Okay. Now we could also create drill down dimensions, and drill down dimensions allow you to create a natural hierarchy or a parent-child relationship. And they're set up very simply by just choosing the dimension, such as country, and then I want to drill into, let's say, city, and then I want to drill into the customer name in each city, and I'll just call this location drill and add that dimension. Okay, so hopefully that'll give you a quick idea of how to create additional dimensions. Now for measures, same process. We go into the function editor, and I can start using my aggregates. So if I just wanted to create a simple sum of sales, like we've been using, I can do that. And we can call this revenue. And create another one. Maybe we want to do the sum of gross profit divided by sum of sales, and that'll give us margin percentage. And click create. Now, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to incorporate some external data from Qlik Data Market. And the reason for that is, let's say we have a scenario where the sales have been entered in the system as US sales, but we also need to see that appropriate sale figure as euros. Well, I don't have an exchange rate. Now very easily I can go into variables and I can get the exchange rate and input that number as a variable and then update it appropriately each time. But what about the next time we refresh this data? What if the exchange rate was also refreshed? How would we do that? First, we would need a source of external data that had the exchange rates. Well, we so happen to have that. So when I go into my data manager, and what we'll do is add more data, and this time we'll select Qlik Data Market. Now, Qlik Data Market is a set of curated and syndicated data sources. These are externally maintained by Qlik. It is offered as a subscription pay-for service when you have Clixsense Enterprise, but we do include some free data sources that you can also use to incorporate with your internal data. They range from business, demographics, society, weather, economy, and currency, with more data being added on a regular basis. So in this example, I'm going to choose currency. So the free one I have available on Qlik Sense Cloud is 3x3 currency exchange rates, which basically is the US dollar, pound, and euro. Now, I already have a column in my customer data named base currency, so that's how we're going to associate my existing data with this new data that we're pulling in. So I'm going to select the US dollar as my base currency, and my quote currency is going to be the euro, and then we want the exchange rate for the most recent. And this will pull back one row of data. Note, you can pull back multiple rows of data. I'm just using this as an example to introduce you to Qlik Data Market and show you how you can pull in external data from the service. I'm going to click Profile so you can just see the relationship that we have already built. You can see that in my customers data, I have a column called base currency, and then the new data coming back also has a column called base currency. Now the values are red just because the match of the values are less than a certain percentage. In this case, only one value is coming back as US dollar, but this is the appropriate recommended association. So I'm going to click Load and Finish. Okay, so we've just added that data to my app. Let's go back to our app and let's create another measure. And in this case here, we're going to also take our sum of sales And then we're going to multiply this by the new exchange rate. And you'll notice in my list, there's my exchange rate. Click Apply, and we'll call this Euro Sales. And now I can take my Euro Sales measure and drop it right on top of my existing KPI, and I can add that as a complementary measure. So you can see now sum of sales here. Let's change that sum of sales and call that US sales. And then we have Euro sales, and I can change the color of one of them. Let's make this one green and that one blue. Okay, so that gives you an example of how to derive fields utilizing the master items list, dimensions and measure sections, as well as how you can incorporate external data with Qlik Data Market. Now that we've created these measures and dimensions, let's use them in another visualization. Let's take a scatter plot, and let's add our location drill. Let's add our margin and our revenue. And there's our scatter plot. And we'll call this one sales versus margin. Okay, now that we have our scatter plot, let me just go into analysis mode and just show you how the location drill dimension worked. So as I select the United States and I confirm that selection, you can see the scatter plot updates with the next level, in this case, which was cities. So the cities within the US. Okay, and then just for your reference in regards to the years and the months that we've created, there are the years and there are the months. Okay, so let me just clear that up. Okay, so getting back to this particular chart object, let me just clear out country. Now, a note about the scatter plot. You can clearly see that the United States is considered an outlier when it comes to margin versus sales. And that's because of its distance away from the other dots. And then this location here is showing, let's say, more of a nominal percentage for margin and sales. Now, what happens if you have millions, if not billions, of unique data points? If you try to plot them within a scatter plot, information is going to get hidden or lost, and it's not going to be easy to summarize the outliers that are there. Now, granted, you might be able to see the ones on the outer edges, but what about the ones that are closer or in clustered or covered underneath each other, for example? Well, we've introduced something called smart data compression that solves that particular problem. And let me give you an example of that. I have a order ID field, which has about maybe 2,700 order IDs, but you'll be able to get the picture when I replace the location drill dimension. You'll notice that the scatter plot will automatically configure itself utilizing these blue squares and then shades of blue, where hotspots are indicated by a darker shade, which indicates a higher density or concentration of those unique data points. So at a glance, I could immediately see, focusing within this area between 0 and 10% of that margin and this particular sales range. Now, if I go into an analysis mode, I could actually zoom in to these locations and start to reveal more information, such as the number of those unique data points that fall within those hotspots. And I continue to zoom in. We open it up a little bit more. And then as it gets into a point where it's, let's say, under 1,000 data points, it'll then show the individual scattered points. Okay, so this is called smart data compression. And then we've also introduced a couple of appearance and adjustment settings to change the compression resolution depending on the number of points that are available. Okay, so nice unique feature available within the scatter plots. Okay, let's add a map component. Okay, now a map will need location dimensions, which is going to be in the form of a point created with latitude and longitude. Now I haven't added that data in here, but I do happen to have it on my local desktop. So once again, I'm going to go into my data manager, and I'm going to attach files, and I'm going to grab this QVD file, which I have, which has my latitude and longitude, and it's going to automatically associate within my customer city. So we're just going to load and finish that, and then go back to my design, and now I could add the city dimension. And there is my map with my individual city points. Now, this is basically just plotting locations across the world, but what about the sales figures? So let's just go grab our sales metric, or we can simply go to our master items, go to our measures, grab our revenue, and I can drop it right on top. And now the size of the dot is indicating the number of sales or the size of the sales revenue. We could change the bubble size, and then we could also change, let's say, the color scheme. Now note there's some other adjustment settings in here. One thing to point out as a differentiator, you're not locked in to the map service that we use. We use Mapbox OpenStreet, which means the usage negotiations and license agreements have already been discussed and taken care of by Qlik. So you can freely use this to plot your data in the form of points. However, if you have a Slippy Map server, you can turn this off and provide your own URL to the Slippy Map server. We do provide other examples of public ones available in our documentation. Let's give this a meaningful title. Just call it Sales by City. Okay, so one other thing I want to show you that's been added is the ability to upload media, or in this case, graphics. So I'm just going to adjust my Kpi object, and I'm going to grab my text and image object, and then add an image. And you can see there's a section here called Upload Media. This allows me to then browse my location locally on my workstation and upload a graphic to the Qlik Sense Cloud. So Qlik Sense Cloud now supports graphics within its apps and its data stories. So here we'll select the Qlik logo. We'll choose to put that in, and now we have a nice logo as part of our app. Okay, so at this point we can be considered completed with this app. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to publish this app to my shared stream so I can then share it with another individual. And the way we do that is by going back to the Qlik Cloud Hub, and we select our app, right-click, and select Publish to Shared Cloud. Then by going over to my shared cloud stream, I will have that app available. Now to share this, there is a button down here where it says Following Me. Currently, as of the recording of this webinar, you can share this freely with up to 5 individual users, and those users can then register on the Qlik Sense Cloud and use it appropriately. I basically just click that button and put in the email address of the individual that I want to share this with, which could be inside or outside of my organization. In this case, it's clickclouduser@outlook.com, and I click Submit. And you will see a little notification here showing pending. Now that particular user has registered already with the Qlik Sense Cloud, and you can tell by the name of that user popping up here. If the email address was not registered, it would just show that person's email address. So you can see here the status is pending. So let's go over to the Outlook email, and I will simulate that I'm Joe Q. And to simulate a different device, I'm using my iPad here, and I'm logged into Outlook email, and you can see we received an email. And that email shows that the colleague Mike Tarallo would like to share a Qlik Sense app with you, and here's the link to accept the invitation. Now, obviously, if that person wasn't registered, this particular invitation would actually guide them to register and then bring them into their hub. So I'm going to click on that link, and it's going to bring me right to the interface where I've already registered, and I'm going to log in. And now you can see that there's a stream on the left with the individual who shared that particular app with you, and there it is, Sales Webinar Analysis. I'll touch that app, and then it will load just like you saw within my machine a moment ago, but this time through the interface on the iPad. There's our app overview. And there is our app. And it has a complete responsive design. If I turn the iPad in a vertical, you can see how the application will adjust itself accordingly. It's not just visualizations that will resize, it's also menu configurations and selection interface options that will also adjust to give you the optimal viewing and usage experience. And in the spirit of sharing on a mobile device, I also wanted to show you how you can create very easily on a device such as a tablet. So if you remember earlier in the presentation, I gave you a demonstration on utilizing the consumer sales app. So I'm going to navigate to the sales stream, select the consumer sales app, and instead of actually navigating the sales rep performance statistics, I want to use this approved app as a basis for creating my own analysis. So you can see I have a section here marked My Sheets. So I'm going to click Create New Sheets, and I'm going to accept the default parameters, go into the sheet, and then I'm going to click Edit. And then based off of that approved library of governed visualizations, dimensions, and measures, I could actually start creating my own visualizations. So for example, I can start out with the sales versus margin visualization that you see here, and then I can sustain hold and unlink this visualization, in other words, the locked properties and dimensions are now accessible to me, and I can change the dimension, such as let's look at city and replace product subgroup. So now we see the appropriate cities for that scatter plot. I could also create brand new by choosing a chart object and then adding the appropriate dimensions and measures. So in this case, let's choose customer and let's choose revenue. So this is just to give you an example of how you can create within a tablet. And then when you're done, you could actually take this sheet and sustain hold, and I can publish this to what's called the community. And by publishing it to the community, others who have access to the same app can also see my findings and utilize my analysis as well. Okay, so the last thing I'd like to cover with you guys is, in the spirit of sharing again in general, if you remember, I shared that particular app into my shared stream, which makes it available to others that I send an invitation to. Well, I don't always have to do that. If I wanted to share this in a public setting, in other words, where users don't have to subscribe to the Qlik Sense Cloud, I can share bits and pieces of my app and embed it into social media, into a tweet, into Facebook, or even perhaps into a blog. I can also just send a little bit of information as a link. So to give you an example, this is that particular app we created. If you right-click on a chart object, you have a share option from the menu that pops up. Upon selecting that, you have a dialog that shows the actual URL to that chart object or an iframe with some embed code. So let me just take that embed code and let me go over to my blog. Now this is an older blog I used to maintain. I use it for examples. So let's say I had some information here and I wanted to insert it right here in my blog entry. Well, let me go into editing my blog and let me paste in that iframe code, click on update. That'll update the particular page, and then we'll go back to my blog and refresh. And now you can see that Clixsense chart is now part of my blog entry. Now when that chart is shared, if you go back to the Qlik Cloud Hub, there'll be a stream called Clixsense Charts, and in there will be the actual chart that you shared with the URL. At that point, you can use that URL in a variety of different application means that you share on the web. Okay, so before we go into taking questions, I want to remind you that you can continue exploring Clixsense on your own with the help of these resources: our online help site, the Qlik community, and to further your education that you can customize while learning at your own pace, please check out the all-new Qlik Continuous Classroom. And now, I'll take the first question.